I woke up one Tuesday at 6 a.m. to the sound of a bulldozer tearing through my land. I rushed outside in just my boots and boxer shorts, no shirt, and there was my grandfather's 80-year-old bridge, the one he built in 1943, being torn down. I could see the stone crumbling, the timbers splashing into the creek. And do you know what really got me? They were standing there, laughing, filming it all on their phones like it was some sort of joke. What they didn't know was this: I owned the only other road into their gated community. I could make their lives a living hell, and I was about to teach them a lesson they'd never forget. All 85 houses in Meadowbrook, the community that had just been built on what used to be the Cowalick farm, and I was about to make their commute a whole lot harder. Let me back up. I'm Garrett Sullivan, 54 years old, third-generation civil engineer, and I live on 127 acres in rural Pennsylvania, about 40 minutes outside Pittsburgh. My family's owned this land since 1938, and for as long as I can remember, it's been quiet. The only sounds you hear are creek water over limestone, the occasional diesel truck, and birdsong in the morning. It's the kind of place where you wake up to peace, not honking horns or the constant buzz of the city. This property has a long history. My grandfather, Pop Sullivan, built everything himself, including that bridge in 1943. He pulled the stones from a creek bed, milled the timber, and forged the iron brackets at the town blacksmith. It took him 8 months. When I was a kid, I learned to fish under that bridge and later helped my dad replace the planks. Every time I drove over it, I could almost hear Pop's voice echoing. Build something right, and it outlasts you. Now, I'm semi-retired. I got a few consulting gigs and some land lease income. Life's been quiet, especially since my wife passed away 2 years ago, leaving me here with my daughter in Oregon. But then, 18 months ago, the developers moved in. They built Meadowbrook Estates on the old Cowalick farm. 85 homes, starting at $1,600 a month, gated, with an HOA that acts like it runs the whole county. They needed a sewage easement across my land for their construction, and I negotiated a deal for $12,000. Everything was legal, signed, sealed, and recorded. Thought that was the end of it. Then I met Darlene, the new president of the Meadowbrook HOA. Darlene was a real piece of work. She's 62, a real estate agent with a Tesla Model X, bleach blonde hair, and monogrammed everything. She moved in, and 3 months later, bam, she's the HOA president. In April, she knocked on my door. No call, no heads up, just a certified letter demanding I remove my bridge within 30 days. She said it was an eyesore and a flood hazard, according to an environmental study done by the HOA. I read the letter twice. My response: Lady, that bridge is entirely on my property. Your HOA has zero authority here. But she didn't back down. She smiled, oh, that fake smile, and told me they had documentation showing it was abandoned county infrastructure. I laughed in her face. Your study is 4 pages from a landscaping company. It doesn't even have an engineer's signature on it. But she smiled again and said they'd follow up through proper channels. A week later, at 6:04 a.m., I woke up to the sound of a diesel engine again. I ran outside, saw a bulldozer ripping through my bridge, and screamed at the operator. He waved me off. County demo, he said, got a work order, as if it was nothing. And then I saw them, Darlene and 2 HOA board members, standing by my access road, filming it all, one of them laughing. I called 911, but by the time the sheriff showed up 40 minutes later, my bridge was rubble. Darlene played it cool. She handed the deputy a folder, saying they removed a hazard. The deputy looked at me and shrugged. Civil matter, he said. I had to sue. I walked back to my porch and just sat there, the smell of crushed limestone in the air, the creek running muddy. And that's when it hit me. Darlene wanted a fight, and I was going to show her how a civil engineer handles a battle. I hired a lawyer, Mitch Kowalski, a local guy who specializes in land disputes. Mitch looked at the photos of my demolished bridge and said, Garrett, This is the most clear-cut property destruction case I've seen in 20 years. We filed an emergency injunction and a lawsuit for $78,000 in damages. That number wasn't random. $135,000 for reconstruction, $125,000 for historical value, $1,180,000 for emotional distress. The sheriff's report was vague, but the county building inspector confirmed my bridge was on my land, fully legal, and Darlene's team had 0 permits. Then Darlene's lawyers tried to get cute. They filed a counterclaim saying my bridge had been used publicly for 80 years, that it should now be county property under something called adverse possession. Mitch actually laughed when he read their filing. They didn't do their homework, Garrett. Adverse possession only works if the real owner abandoned the property or stopped maintaining it. You've got receipts for every plank replacement, every bag of gravel, every can of wood sealant. He was right. I had kept everything. My dad always said, paper trail beats memory in court every time. We submitted decades of maintenance records, photos of my private property signs, and tax documents showing the bridge was always part of my assessed property value. The judge dismissed their counterclaim in 3 weeks. But Darlene wasn't done. She hired a Pittsburgh law firm and filed a motion to dismiss my lawsuit. They accused me of harassment and wasted legal time. Then they offered me a settlement. I was to drop my lawsuit, and in exchange, they'd donate $5,000 to the local Veterans Fund in my grandfather's name. I pushed the paper back across the table. I couldn't believe it. After they demolished my bridge in 40 minutes, they were going to slap his name on a charity check and act like everything was fine. I turned them down. Then things got worse. Someone forwarded me screenshots from Meadowbrook's private Facebook group. Darlene had posted that I was blocking community safety improvements and that I cared more about an old bridge than my neighbor's safety. Comments poured in, calling me unstable, accusing me of sabotaging the neighborhood. I was furious, but I didn't respond. I called up an old friend, Lyle, who told me to let it go and focus on winning, not on Facebook drama. I dug into records, old survey maps, property deeds, permits. And one morning, I found it, the crack in Darlene's armor. Meadowbrook's sewage system had been operating on expired permit for months. The county commissioner, Todd Giesham, Darlene's boyfriend, had been fast-tracking permits for them, approving things that should have taken longer. The permits had expired 14 months ago, and now I had the proof to shut it all down. I didn't tell anyone at first, but once I had all the evidence, I called Andrea Walsh, the local investigative journalist. She was skeptical at first, but once I laid out the details, she saw the bigger picture. This wasn't just about my bridge anymore. Darlene and Giesham had built a little empire of corruption, and it was time for it to fall. The next few weeks were a blur. Andrea ran with the story, and by the time the media firestorm hit, the county ethics board was forced to investigate. I was getting calls from reporters, from residents of Meadowbrook apologizing to me. And then came the bombshell. Darlene had been embezzling HOA funds for months, paying herself consulting fees, inflating invoices, and using the money for personal expenses. In the middle of all this, I filed a formal notice with the county that I was shutting down Old Mill Road and terminating the utility easement Meadowbrook had been using. The county panicked. Meadowbrook's backup access was through my land, and without it, they couldn't function. I was in control, and I wasn't about to let Darlene get away with it. Mediation day came, and the room was packed. Darlene was there, but she looked different, broken. I presented my case, the destroyed bridge, the fake environmental study, the harassment. And then, just when everyone thought Darlene might walk away with a settlement, I dropped the bombshell. Meadowbrook's sewage permit had expired, and they were running utilities illegally on my land. I gave them one option, pay up, or I shut all down. The room erupted. But in the end, Darlene and her lawyers had no choice but to accept my terms. Meadowbrook paid for the bridge reconstruction, published a public apology, and I got the compensation I deserved. Darlene was out of the HOA presidency, and the residents finally got the leadership they deserved. The bridge was rebuilt exactly as it had been. The community came together to restore it, and we dedicated it in the summer. It wasn't just about getting revenge. It was about standing up for what was right. And as for Darlene, she moved away a few months later, selling her house at a loss. I don't think about her anymore. What matters is that I won. And I got my bridge back. Now, I've got a question for you. Have you ever dealt with an HOA or a corrupt board? Drop your story in the comments. I want to hear how you fought back. And if you're in a battle like mine, let me know where you're stuck. This community has your back.